Peace, peace, everyone. Peace, peace. Let's see some ones if y'all can hear us clearly.
Mic check, 2 2 1 2. Peace, everybody. Grand afternoon. Peace, peace.
Greetings to everyone this afternoon. I hope y'all can hear me loud and clear.
All right, all right. See if we can being heard. But as you can tell by the title, the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano is something we decided to do today because during yesterday's Rising show, someone submitted a question and asked us about it. So we did a little bit of research on it. And what we found out about the person and the story. No sellout, James. Anything y'all want to say before we get started? While I'm posting this link real quick.
Nope, I'm just ready to hear this. Ready to see both sides of this. Nice, interesting conversation that's been spoken about before, but we haven't spoken about it before, so it'd be nice to dive into it.
All right. So on that note, I guess we'll start here. The link to where we're reading from is posted in the chat. And it starts where it says the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vass, the African, first published in 1789 in London. It's the autobiography of Olaudah Equiano. The narrative is argued to be a variety of styles, such as a slavery narrative, a travel narrative, and a spiritual narrative. The book describes Equiano's time spent in enslavement and documents his attempt at becoming an independent man through his study of the Bible and his eventual success in gaining his own freedom and in business thereafter. And instead of going through the chapters of the book and stuff real quick, finna go down to the information where it says controversy about origins. It states, the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vass, the African, originally published in 1789, played a large role in altering public opinion towards the slave trade in Britain. Equiano was viewed as an authority in relation to the slave trade. His claim to being born in Eboe, now southern Nigeria, and being captured and traded as a child gave him definite credibility. But his credibility came to question in the 1790s in order to destroy the negative opinion of the slave trade. There were rumors that Equiano was actually born in the West Indies, but these claims were These claims were thrown away for being politically motivated. It drops down and it states, decades after, the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vass, the African, was published and newly edited in 1967 by Paul Edwards. A debate was sparked on the validity of the origins of Equiano's story. In 1999, Vincent Cartier published findings of two records which raised questions regarding Equiano's account of being born in Africa. In particular, he located two documents disproving Equiano's credibility. Is that Carrier? How's that pronounced correctly? Before I keep messing it up. What's that? Caretta found Equiano's baptismal records dated February 9th, 1759, from a church in Westminster, England, where Equiano was recorded as Gustavus Vass, a black born in Carolina, 12 years old, and a naval muster roll from 1773, where Equiano likewise identified his birthplace as South Carolina. These documents were enough to believe that Equiano's claim about his earlier life were probably fictitious. Aside from contradicting Equiano's account directly, these records suggest that even if Equiano was born in Africa, he would have been at most 7 or 8 years old when he was sold into slavery. Given that, he must have been purchased by Michael Henry Pascal in Virginia no later than December 1754. To Peretta, this casts doubt on reliability of Equiano's first-hand descriptions of his home, country, or countrymen. This is Coretta believes that his findings are possible evidence that Equiano had borrowed his account of Africa from others. Coretta goes on to say the timing of the publication of the interesting narrative was not an accident. Noting the revelation that Gustavus Vass was a native-born Igbo originally named Olaudah Equiano appears to have evolved during 1788 in response to the needs of the abolitionist movement. It goes on to state, he explains that Equiano presumably knew what parts of his story could be collaborated, others, and more importantly, if he was combining fiction with fact, what parts could not easily be contradicted. Equiano's fellow abolitionists were calling for precisely the kind of account of Africa and the Middle Passage that he supplied, because only a native African would have experienced the Middle Passage. The abolitionist movement needed an African, not an African American voice. Equiano's autobiography, autobiography collaborated and even explicitly drew upon earlier reports of Africa in the Middle Passage by some white observers and challenged those of others. Goes on to state where it says Paul E. Lovejoy disputes Corretta's claim that Vass was born in South Carolina because of Vass's knowledge of Igbo society. Lovejoy refers to Equiano as Vass because he never used his African name until he wrote his narrative. Lovejoy believes Vass's description of his country and his people is sufficient confirmation that he was born where he said he was. And based on when boys received the sacrification, that he was about 11 when he was kidnapped, as he claims would suggest a birth date of about 1742, not 1745 or 1747. Lovejoy's thoughts on the baptismal records are that Vass couldn't have made up his origins because he would have been too young. Lovejoy goes on to say, if correct about Vass's age at the time of baptism, accepting the documentation evidence, then he was too young to have created a complex fraud about origins. The fraud must have been perpetrated later. But when? Certainly the baptismal records cannot be used as proof that he committed fraud, only that his godparents might have. Then it says, goes down, Lovejoy also believes that Equiano's godparents, the Gurians and Pascals, wanted people to think that Vass was Creole born and not a native African because he had mastered English so well by then, or for other reasons related to perceived higher status for Creoles. It says in 2007, Mrs. Carriette wrote a response to Lovejoy's claims about Equiano's godparents saying, Lovejoy can offer no evidence for such a desire or perception. Carriette went on to say Equiano's age on the 1759 baptismal records to be off by a year or two before puberty is plausible, but to have it off by 5 years, as Lovejoy contends, would place Equiano well into puberty at the age of 17, when he would have been far more likely to have had a say in and later remembered what was recorded, and his godparents and witnesses should have noticed the difference between a child and adolescence. And that's just a brief narrative on what we came across dealing with the controversies about his origins. But also, we have the benefit of having a very own Doodle Vision that has some more points that he can drop on the story as well. Anything you wanted to add?
I hope that I'm coming through loud and clear now. If not, please let me know.
No, it was coming in with the static in the background again.
Okay, hold on. Give me about 30 seconds and I'm going to get situated because we'll need to go on the paint hard on this one.
Anything that you wanted to add it to it real quick from what you was hearing, no sellout?
Sorry, I'm trying to get to the mute button. I'm ready to find out who this guy is. I don't know. Somebody got to have something right. So there's two accounts. I mean, kind of want to know what the consensus is. Or two, my bad, not two accounts, but two explanations of where he's from.
I'm waiting for James to get ready. I'll go into where it says the reception of it. It says the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano was one of the first widely read slave narratives. 8 editions were printed during the author's lifetime, and it was translated into Dutch and German. The structure and rhetorical strategies of the book were influential and credited a model of subsequent slave narratives. The different kinds of aspects and ideas in his narratives, such as travel, religion, and slavery, caused some readers to debate what kind of narrative his writing is: a slavery narrative, a spiritual narrative, or a travel narrative. The work has proven so influential in the study of African and African American literacy that it is frequently taught in both English literature and history classrooms and universities. The work has also been republished in the influential Hyman African Writers series.
All right, sorry about that. Am I coming through better now? Hopefully I am.
Crystal clear.
Now, Brother Bones, you had mentioned earlier about his baptismal record. And again, with him being young, and they say, well, he didn't understand the language, and I get all that, and that's a possibility. However, we need to go and examine the ship's log, because he was the captain of a ship later on in life. And it mentions again, when he became a ship captain, that he was born in South Carolina. So now we have some uh-ohs. Now, I can understand when he was 11, he may not have known, but when he got older and he became a ship's captain, why didn't he change the narrative then? If he was stating that he was from Africa, why didn't it change then? Why did it change later on in life? So these are the questions that we have to answer in order to draw a sound conclusion. I'm going to come back when I'm going to yield the mic. I'm going to give you some more evidence. I'm going to yield the mic.
Yeah, that's one of the things of going through the story that stuck out to me, that I was like, okay. Yeah, that's one of the things of that the younger ages, okay, there could be something wrong with it, but then also in 1773, he's on the Munsters Road, and we know through his story he was a ship captain in the Navy. So naval records state that he's from South Carolina.
So now go on to the records of him being listed from South Carolina, and it goes on in his memoirs. I apologize for that. In his memoirs, that he goes into detail about all of his travels, and that he was an officer, an overseer of slaves on multiple occasions. And it goes on to detail of all of his travels, all of the places that he had gone, all of his journeys. But the most traumatic journey, there is no account. And that is of the Middle Passage. Says at 11 years old, he was kidnapped from Africa and shipped away. No mentioning of the conditions in which he traveled. No mention of any other persons that were shipped off with him. The length of the journey, where he ended up, the whole nine. These are things that we have to discuss in detail again in order to draw a solid conclusion of, is he an African, specifically a West African, and go more in depth, is he from Nigeria? So we must investigate this, and I'm taking it kind of slow because I don't want anyone, because I know that we heard about this gentleman before, and I'm just gonna call him Gus because that's what he said he is. He's Gus. So Gus has gone on, and we know about him, and those that have done their research and they use him as an example. I see a lot of Pan-Africanists always use him as an example, but have they done any research or investigating on what actually has taken place? Now, we know from doing research and doing our series of studies that they have listed some of us later on as being from Africa. Found out that those that they say that are in South America claiming to be African were actually shipped from here. We also have record of those that were in. So we have to put all this together and start asking these questions about, is Gus an actual African, or is he an Indian / mulatto from the Americas? I yield the mic.
What kind of gives it away is when the one dude was trying to defend him, when he mentioned that the grandparents and the family were Creole. That stuck out to me.
Yeah, and that's what leaves us in a dilemma, because why would he be listed as a Creole? Because there are distinguishing factors between a Creole and an African. So why would someone trying to defend him label him as a Creole and not an African? Because there is a difference between the two. That we know a Creole has some mixture of blood, some European somewhere in there, but we all not agree. I hope those in the chat also can agree.
That's a good question. Cause it caught my eye. I'm like, hold up, man. If he was African, why would that even be an option?
Then we have to get into how his memoirs kind of parallels another author whose sources he has cited, named Anthony Benzenet. And I'm going to put that in the chat. I'm going to put that in the YouTube chat so you can actually do research on this gentleman yourself. So some of these places and some of these spots of Gus's early childhood when he said he was from Africa mimic exactly what Anthony Bizenet mentioned earlier, before Gus. I'm gonna put that name in the back chat. You can look it up for yourself. I'll be right back. I'm gonna put that in the back chat.
What do you think about it so far, no sellout? Any input?
But don't sell out if you're talking. We can't hear you. He may be in awe over there. He may be in shock.
I was just looking up something real quick on him. Just did a quick genealogy thing, and it's kind of funny they mentioned grandparents and stuff. No, so like you was trying to say something?
Our brother No Sellout is over there collecting his bearings. I also put the source that Gus was using. I put that in the YouTube chat as well. And again, you'll see a lot of his plight that he mentioned in his early childhood. It parallels and mimics the very same writings these authors began to make up because they wanted this narrative of you're all from Africa. You don't belong over here. So we're going to keep following the breadcrumbs. It's going to lead us back to the table.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Mr. Anthony right now. All right, it says Anthony Benzet, born Antonio Benzet, was a French-born American abolitionist and educator who was active in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, one of the early American abolitionists. Benzet founded one of the world's first anti-slavery societies, the Society for the Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage. After his death, it was revised as the Pennsylvania School for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery, the first public school for girls in North America, and the Negro School at Philadelphia, which operated in the 19th century. And this is 1713 to 1784?
Yes, sir.
It's kind of funny. He names it the Society for the Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage.
Say the name of that one more time. Say that again.
The Society for the Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage.
Well, well, well. And he was from where again?
Going down. Was born, was a French American born. It didn't say where he was born, didn't get to that part yet. It was going down to a little history on it real quick. Born in France, Vincent Saint Quentin, France on 31st January 1713 to a family of Protestants known in France as the Huguenots, because Protestants had been persecuted and suffered violent attacks since the crown's revocation. Like many others, decided to leave France. They moved first to Rotterdam, Netherlands, then briefly to Greenwich before settling in London, England, where there was a sizable community in 1727. Vanzetti joined the Religious Society of French Quakers. And say again, they say in 1727, he joined the Religious Society of Friends, also known as the Quakers.
Oh, so the wood shoe wearing Dutch. Here we go again.
It goes on to say in 1731, the Benzett family immigrated to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, founded by Quakers and one of the English colonies of North America. Then 18 years old, Anthony Benzett joined John Woolman as one of the earliest American abolitionists. Like Woolman, Benzetti also advocated war tax resistance. Philadelphia, Benzetti worked to persuade his Quaker brethren that slave owning was not consistent with Christian doctrine. He believed that the English ban on slavery should be extended to North American and Caribbean colonies after the Americans gained independence in the Revolutionary War. Benezet continued to urge the United States to ban slavery, and the state of Pennsylvania legislated slavery gradual abolition in 1780. It says after several years as a failed merchant in 1739, Benezet began teaching at a Germantown school, then a separate jurisdiction, northwest of Philadelphia in 1742. He moved the Friends English School of Philadelphia, now the William Penn Charter School, in 1750. He added night classes for black slaves to his schedule. In 1754, I'll come back to that part, but in 1754, Benezet left the Friends English School to set up his own school, the first public girls' school on the American continent. His students included daughters from the prominent families such as Deborah Norris and Sally Worcester. In 1770, he founded the Negro School at Philadelphia for black children. There was a growing free black community in Philadelphia, which increased after the state abolished slavery. Abolitionist sympathizers such as Abigail Hopper Gibbons continued to teach at Benezet's Negro School in the years before the American Civil War. It goes on to say in 1775, he helped found the first anti-slavery society, the Society for Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage. At his death, Benjamin Franklin and Dr. Benjamin Rush reconstructed this association as the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery. Well, well, well.
So you see, here's where, again, another breadcrumb. You have those that come under the auspices of being abolitionists, which are, again, your Dutch, aka your Germans, aka your Acadians, aka your Vikings, all the same people. Now, if you're from this land and you're able to produce propaganda to tell the original people of this continent that they are from Africa, then would it not make it easier for those that came over, for the foreigners that came over, to take land that is no longer occupied? Because you have been given this narrative of you are from Africa. So now we're going to get to where the rubber meets the road. Again, in 1773, Gus had an opportunity to tell the truth. He joined a crew that was headed to the Arctic Circle. Why did he say again that he was from and born in South Carolina? Why did he not say he was from Africa then? Why did he say then in 1773 that he was from Africa? Why did he say that he was from South Carolina? He's grown now and been grown, but you gave the research on my man Tony. And when you continue to do more research on Tony, you'll find out why they were pushing this abolitionist movement and saying that they needed freedom, which you're going to see later on how this leads up to the American Colonization Society and this push of go to Africa. But then you had the pushback of those that were here, classified as colored and Negro, were saying, no, we're not from Africa. So why would we want to go to Africa when we're not from Africa? Go ahead, brother. I mean to interrupt the flow, but I'm going to come back in just a moment.
No, none whatsoever. The part that stuck out to me is where I read where it said he moved to the Friends English School of Philadelphia. And it says, now the William Penn Charter School. In 1750, he added night classes for black slaves to his schedule. It just sticks out to me if he's saying black slaves, and specifically for black slaves, then don't that mean there's another type of slave too?
Whoa. Yeah. So what slaves was he teaching during the day? Yep, that makes you think. What type of people was he teaching throughout the day? And what was being taught in this school? And I'm on my cell. I'm not at my laptop at the moment. But Brother Bones, do you happen to have the information on Mr. Gus and when he converted to Christianity and where and how? What denomination of Christianity he became?
Let me scroll down real quick. Give me like 1 minute. Okay, what I pulled up was Equiano had embraced Christianity at the age of 14 and its importance to him as a recurring theme in his autobiography. He identified as a Protestant of the Church of England. He was baptized while in London. Several events in Equiano's life led him to question his faith. That was just a quick dig on him, real quick.
Let's get into what were those things, events that happened in his life to question his faith. It was never when he was an overseer of slaves, because he was an overseer. So we're going to go back to the event that traumatized him so much that led him to question his faith. What had he been to? Journeys that he's been to, not all of the people that he was overseeing that were quote unquote slaves in the Americas. Let's just dig and find out what event led him to question his faith.
I got 1773 on a Royal Navy ship. Racehorse, he traveled to the Arctic in an expedition to find a northern. Hold on, let's see if it'll let me pull some more up.
While he's going there, I'll just kind of, I don't want to freestyle, but I'm a freestyle for a little bit. I'm not a freestyler though. That it is not until, I mentioned it before, but it wasn't until he almost died in the Arctic Circle, almost froze to death. That's when he reached an epiphany and said, you know what? I need to start worrying about these other people that are mistreated. It never dawned on him all of these years until he almost froze to death in the Arctic Circle. Again, not when he was an overseer, not on all the journeys he was going back and forth, not on him being mistreated when he was in England, none of that. It was when he almost froze to death in the Arctic Circle. And he was a full-grown man then. That's when he reached an epiphany. Just something to think about.
Pulling up some information still.
Peace to everybody in the chat. Peace, Pamela Hall, Golden Moon, Brittany Davis, peace, peace, Macadon One, peace. What's going on, y'all?
Man, I can't find nothing to go deep into 1773. So far, everything I pulled up just mentioned him going to the Arctic. Trying to see if we can.
Pamela Hall has a question. I'll take your question and raise you an answer. She says, in what year did they start taking people from here to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and England? Mic check.
Oh, we're here. I'm sorry. That did not start from here to there until you start getting into the 1800s, the early 1800s.
1822 is the exact date.
Mm-hmm. But we do know that Cherokee were over in Africa prior to that. And we know that because they took the customs, the food, and the language with them. Again, V-A-I, Cherokee, V-A-I, Cherokee. I'll say it one more time. V-A-I, it's Cherokee. They still speak Vi in West Africa, in those lands where the Cherokee were today. I yield the mic.
Yeah, since it was mentioned, read a little bit, just a couple of just one paragraph on it. It says Liberia is a country in West Africa which was founded, established, and colonized and controlled by citizens of the United States and ex-Caribbean slaves as a colony for the former African American slaves, and their free black descendants. I'm gonna read this again. Liberia is a country in West Africa which was founded, established, colonized, and controlled by citizens of the United States and ex-slaves as a colony for former African American slaves and their free black descendants. It is one of the only two sovereign countries in the world that was started by citizens and ex-Caribbean slaves of a political power as a colony for former slaves of the same political power, the other being Sierra Leone. Established by Great Britain, settlement of former slaves was organized by the American Colonization Society, the ACS. The mortality rate of these settlers was the highest in accuracy and accurately recorded human history. Of the 4,571 immigrants who arrived in Liberia from 1820 to 1843, they say only 1,819 survived until 1843. And I'm going to stop there because there's a problem with that story. To say that the people there did it when we all know, and it mentioned in the beginning that the United States bought the land, it's a U.S. colony, so much of a U.S. colony, the capital is named after President James Monroe, Monroeville.
And not to forget or leave out the civil wars that took place because these foreigners came into West Africa trying to claim land. That story sounds familiar. That does not belong to them. And it caused the natives of that land to rebel. See, we skip over all of that. There was no welcome home, my brothers. Welcome home, my sisters. Welcome home, my lost relatives. It caused a series of civil wars. So if they were all getting along and if they were brothers and sisters, why did that occur? I yield the mic. I'll be back shortly.
I just looked up the ACS, American Colonization Society. It says the Society for the Colonization of Free People of Color of America, commonly known as the American Colonization Society, ACS, was a group established in 1816 by Robert Finley of New Jersey, which supported the migration of free African Americans to the continent of Africa. The society in 1821 and 1822 helped to found a colony on the Pepper Coast of West Africa as a place for free-born or manumitted American blacks. The ACS met with immediate and continuing objections with such African Americans as James Forten and David Walker, who wished to remain in the land of their birth, saw colonization as a racist strategy for projecting slavery and purging the U.S. of its black citizens. Let me read this again. The ACS met with immediate and continuing objections from such African Americans as James Forten and Dave Walker, who wished to remain in the land of their birth, saw colonization as a racist strategy for projecting slavery and purging the U.S. and for protecting slavery and purging the U.S. of its black citizens. And preferred to fight for equal rights at home. Colonizers were also met with resistance and attacks from those already living in or around the areas being colonized. What Brother James just mentioned, there was some religious support and missionary efforts were part of the colonization. Disease was a major problem, with Liberian immigrants suffering the highest mortality rates accurately recovered in human history. Yeah, we did them numbers already.
Sure did.
What you was gonna say?
No, I said we did them numbers already.
Goes on to say here, the ACS was founded by groups otherwise opposed to each other on the issue of slavery, being a coalition made up of mostly of evangelicals and Quakers who supported abolition of slavery and believed blacks would face better chances for freedom in Africa than in the United States. I'm going to say this again. The ACS was founded by groups otherwise opposed to each other on the issue of slavery, being a coalition made up mostly of evangelicals and Quakers who supported abolition of slavery and believed blacks would face better chances for freedom in Africa than in the United States, and some slaveholders in the Maryland branch and elsewhere who saw reparations as a way to remove free blacks from slave societies and avoid slave rebellions. The two opposed groups found common ground in support of so-called shipping your behind out. Long story short. Like I said, some more parts keep sticking out. It's in the wording on how they say it at times too, where they say who supported abolition of slavery and believed blacks would face better chances for freedom in Africa than in the United States.
And I'm still going back to, if all of these people were Africans, you'll notice that only a small percentage, and I do mean a percent of people went over to Sierra Leone and Liberia during this movement. So if I'm being mistreated and I'm being enslaved by the millions, why did we not see a mass exodus? Why were there people standing their ground and say, we are from this land? Our ancestors are from this land. Why was there such a great pushback from those over here stating, no, we're not from Africa. We're not going to Africa. Why were they so determined to stay here? And you've seen we see it currently during war times. We see it in Central America right now, that people are fleeing their homeland, their native land, to go somewhere else. So if all of this was going on over here in the Americas, why did they not leave by the millions if they were shipped over here by the millions? Then we're going to get back to my man Gus here in a minute, and we're going to really put it where the rubber meets the road. I yield the mic.
And just to finish off a little information on the ACS, it says from 1821, thousands of free blacks who faced legislative restrictions in much of the U.S. moved to Liberia. Over 20 years, the colony continued to grow and establish economic stability. In 1847, the legislature of Liberia declared the nation an independent state. The ACS had closely controlled the development of Liberia until its declaration of independence. By 1867, the ACS had assisted in the immigration of more than 13,000 Americans to Liberia. From 1825 to 1919, it published the African Repository and Colonial Journal. After 1919, the society essentially ended, but it did not formally dissolve until 1964, when it transferred its papers to the Library of Congress.
Wait. Did you say it was 130,000?
No, 13,000.
Wait a minute. 1.3 million? 13 million?
13,000.
Okay, I'm just trying. I'm just scratching my head over here, and I'm trying to figure out again. That's a percentage of a percentage. Oh man! Again, where is the mass exodus? I really want to know, where is this mass exodus? Someone please help me to understand. Why did they not leave by the millions? You have a free ticket to go back home. No one was missing you, because when they got over there, they caused conflict and led to wars that are still going on today. Why? Why would they not be welcomed home with open arms? Why would there be no songs written about rejoicing of my long lost relative that I thought was dead returning home? These are the questions you have to ask yourself. I know it's hard. I know once you've been indoctrinated for so long, it is hard to understand and realize when you've been duped, you've been hoodwinked, you've been run amok, you've been bamboozled. I yield the mic.
Then it's even more interesting when you see among the society supporters with Charles Fenton Mercer, Henry Clay, John Randolph, Richard Bland Lee, Bushrod Washington. And it said the society was especially prominent among slave owners in the Virginia Piedmont region in the 1820s and 1830s. American presidents Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, and James Madison were among its supporters. James Madison served as the society's president in the early 1830s. And that is the ACS. made up of your evangelicals and your Quakers to convince you to relocate to a land that you never been to.
Yep. Your evangelicals, jolly old England, and their cousins, the Quakers, aka, I say again, those wooden shoe wearing, river dancing Dutch, aka your Vikings, your Gauls, your Goths, whatever you want to call them, all of the same people. Those from England and those that call themselves the Dutch are kissing cousins. And I'm saying that literally and figuratively. I'll be right back after these messages. I yield the mic.
All right, now to take on some more interesting parts, where it says, in context, following the American Revolutionary War, the institution of slavery and those bound within it grew. As slaves were naturally increasing, their total number reached 4 million slaves by the mid 19th century. At the same time, due in part to the manumission efforts sparked by the war and the abolition of slavery in northern states, there was an expansion of the number of free blacks who faced legislative limits. In the first 2 decades after the Revolutionary War, the percentage of free blacks rose in Virginia, for instance, from 1% to nearly 10% of the black population. Beginning in 1786, just after the American Revolution, a British organization, the Committee for the Relief of Black Poor, launched its efforts to establish the Sierra Leone province of freedom for London's black poor. So right now you're hearing that Sierra Leone was created for London to send the melanated people there. So let's click on this link and see what we can find out about the Committee for the Relief of the Black Poor. Now, I know we hopping around, but trust me, it's all finna tie in. It
Why are you
says the
looking
black.
that up? Go ahead, sir. I know you haven't found it yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, it says the black poor in the 18th century England. The black poor was the name given in the late 18th century to indigent residents of London who were of black ancestry. The black poor had diverse origins. The core of the community were people who had been brought to London as a result of the Atlantic slave trade, sometimes as slaves or indentured servants, who have served on slave ships. At the time, black American sailors served on both Navy and merchant ships. The black poor had become a rare but noticeable sight on the streets of London. Most of the black poor lived in impoverished East End parishes or in Seven Dials and what's that, Marylebone. They formed the portion of border. They formed a portion of the border, black British community, which predominantly consisted of people employed at Manal urban jobs, but had prominent members such as Ignatius Sancho and Olaudah Equiano. See where we're crossing in? While the border community included some women, the black poor seemed to have exclusively consisted of men, some of whom developed relationships with local women and often married them. This is where you start seeing your connection between Olaudah Equiano, the ACS, the Society for the Free and Unjust Treatment of the Negroes, your Quakers, your evangelicals. This is where you see they start tying in.
I was trying to check to see if we had any questions in the chat. Reason why I'd say Lady Tiffany, I know she's in the chat. She's like, what messages? The reason why I say those messages is today's well, no, I don't want to say that, but it's brought to somebody that has a little leprechaun that left Lucky Charms on the cereal. Because if I say the name of that company and say, you know, this is being sponsored by, then I don't want the channel to get flagged for false sponsorship. But y'all know what I'm talking about the, you know, the green clovers and the blue diamonds. So remember the little leprechaun. those Quakers, the AKA the Dutch, AKA wooden shoe wearing. You know, your leprechauns, be potty gold, were little mulattoes that you know them as the Celts. Those Irish, those Scott Irish, which we mentioned before in the Grand Rising show, that you keep seeing all these, and they're mixed with Scott Irish, Scott Irish, Scott Irish, Scott Irish. You'll start to connect the dots and you're seeing who's who. The question is, when all of this uproar, getting back to Gus, all of this uproar, and he was able to get his freedom over in London. And remember, he was just not on the ships. He wasn't scooping out the pig poop from the ships. He was a ship's captain. Why did not he take his behind back home? Because remember, he knew where he was from. Why are you in London causing a stir, creating an organization, when you, sir, could have just gotten on the ship with those that wanted to leave England? Why didn't you go back home? Because he had literally been all over the world. Why didn't he go back home? I yield the mic.
Good question. Been everywhere but home, as you can tell. Let him tell it.
He wasn't riding along as a passenger. You know how sometimes you riding along and I ride my better half, and she's not really paying attention to details. She's kind of looking like, ooh, I see that sign over there. Ooh, you see that big tree over here. Ooh, let's stop over there. And you're really not paying attention. She's not paying attention because she's a passenger. But when you are the ship's captain, you are paying attention to these details because you don't want to end up in the wrong port. So he knew exactly where to go, how to get there, what were the best routes. And it never dawned on him to go home. Nah. Something sounds a little fishy here. He never tried to go home. Never made an attempt to go home. And yes, that's why we put the pros and the cons in the chat to Lady Tiffany. I see that you're looking at both. That is where it has the pros and the cons. Was he an African, or was he an Indian born here in the Americas in South Carolina? So it leaves you to decide. Let you decide. Continue to do your research. But all I'm asking is, if I am free from somewhere and I've been kidnapped, I'm going home. Because what did LeBron do when they held him hostage in Miami? He kept doing the commercial, tell the world I'm coming home. He went home. I yield the mic.
And plus, the more you come across where they have the baptismal records and the naval records for them.
All this time, he keeps saying, I'm South Carolina, I'm South Carolina. And then all of a sudden, he gets his freedom in England. Then he's in London. Me African, free the African. What? Huh? What? When? How does that happen? When did that happen? I yield the mic.
And that's why I say it's interesting to me that you can see the crossing of where they use the character. Because they even tell you the name that everybody refers to him by. That name is only used when it comes to the author of the book. In his life, he didn't go by that name. He went by Gustavus or Gusto or Gus.
And Gus is a Dutch, aka German name. Oh, Brother Bones, we've got. Did you get? Do you see the part where it says that he was saying that he was a Hebrew Israelite from Europe. His people were from Europe, and they went down into Africa and became black. They just turned black in Africa.
What?
Oh yeah, yes. Those people are originally from Europe. He was a Hebrew from Europe, and they went down from Europe into Africa, and they turned black.
It's in his memoirs. And that's why they say there's a big question about his memoirs, because it's three different stories and they all contradict each other.
That sounds like some R1B1 elevates come some, they turn around and conundrum, and you, because you ate too much whales that it made you melanated, turned you black. That's some old
The Eskimo.
that's some old crazy stuff right there. I keep telling you how all of it is connected. All of it is connected.
And this is directly from his memoirs. This isn't nothing that nobody said he said, but this is in his memoirs, in the story that he wrote.
He said straight up and down, his people came from Europe, and they were Hebrews. They are the lost children of Israel, and they went into Africa and they turned black. And that is the same verbiage that the Mormons use. That they came over here, they fell from grace, and their skin turned black. You don't believe me? Ask somebody. Well, I don't know. Ask somebody who's a part of the Mormon church prior to 1977, because they started changing their books. So you may want to talk to some of the elders, because those that come by your house in the nice, crisp button-down shirts and the black slacks on the bikes, they won't know that information. So request to speak to an elder. And if they claim to be who they say they are, they can't lie to your face. I yield the mic. And you'll find out also that this was the same narrative that the original Elias Boudinot, the writer of, well, one of the penmen of the Articles of the Confederation, and also a delegate, Elias Boudinot, who took little Elias Boudinot, who was Cherokee, under his wing, and he changed his name to Elias Boudinot in honor of the Elias Boudinot that wrote A Star in the West, the delegate, the one that was again representing the people, and that he lived amongst some of these Indians. And he said the same thing. He added that in there and said that the people that were here, the book that the Europeans had, talking about the script, aka the Bible, belonged to them, and they fell. And then the Mormon church, because Elias Boudinot was a Mormon, aka now a Latter-day Saint, and they said because they fell, their skin turned black. And Elias Boudinot was also Dutch, aka a Quaker. You've got to follow the breadcrumbs. If you don't, it will never lead you back to the table, and you'll have a house full of ants because you can't figure out why the ants have taken over your picnic because somebody was dropping crumbs. I yield this cotton picking mic.
And just to give a little more information on Sierra Leone, the Sierra Leone Company was the corporate body involved in the founding the second British colony in Africa on 11th of March, 1792, throughout the resettlement of the Black Loyalists. Been settled in Nova Scotia, Scotian settlers after the American Revolutionary War. The company came about because of the work of the ardent abolitionists Granville Sharp, Thomas Clarkson, Henry Thornton, and Thomas' brother. John Clarkson, who is considered one of the founding fathers of Sierra Leone. The company was a successor to the St. George Bay Company, a corporate body established in 1790 that reestablished Granville Town in 1791 for the 60 remaining old settlers.
Y'all gonna learn today. We all gonna learn today. I hope that there are some Pan-Africanists or West Africans. I mean, real West Africans, not somebody claiming to be. Let me put out this disclaimer. When I say things about West Africans, I'm talking about the West Africans that are claiming to be West Africans, but that are rocking unks and dashikis, talking about pyramids in Egypt. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about West African booty scratchers, that is who I'm referring to. Not those that live in the houses that we call tribes over here. They call them the house over there. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about these fake ones that are over here that try to tell the story of the West African better than the West African. Again, you all have heard me say this time and time again. Show me one song of lamentation that the West African was crying for their relatives being sold or shipped away or kidnapped in chains. Please show me that song. We've got what they call old Negro spirituals, wade in the water. We got all that song. We're marching up to Zion. We have all of those Negro spirituals. Where are their Negro spirituals? Songs of lamentation. Where is that? I want to know. Please tell me. Please help me out. I yield the mic.
And a little bit more history on St. George Bay Company. The Sierra Leone Company was the successor to the St. George's Bay Company that had been founded in 1790, following a mostly unsuccessful effort by the Committee for the Relief of the Poor Black in 1787 to establish a free settlement for the Black poor of London, many of whom were Black loyalists who had escaped and fought for the British following Dunmore's proclamation during the War of Independence, during the American War of Independence. And to give a little insight on what Dunmore's proclamation was, just real quick. It says Dunmore's proclamation is a historical documentation signed on November 7th, 1775 by John Murray, 4th Earl of Dunmore, Royal Governor of the British Colony of Virginia. The proclamation declared martial law and promised freedom for slaves of American revolutionaries who left their owners and joined the royal forces. It says formally proclaimed on November 15th. Its publication prompted a flood of slaves from both patriot and loyalist owners to run away and enlist with Dunmore. During the course of the war, between 80,000 and 100,000 slaves escaped from the plantations. It's also raised a furor among Virginia slave owning elites, again of both political persuasions, to whom the possibility of a slave rebellion was a major fear. The proclamation ultimately failed in meeting Dunmore's objectives. He was forced out of the colony in 1776, taking about 300 former slaves with him. I don't know about nobody else, but I remember we was reading all this stuff through the Indian Wars and stuff, and all this stuff is going hand in hand. So why they ain't talking about that? The
Yeah.
slaves. He didn't say nothing about no Africans.
Again, when all this was going on, there had to be some fresh off the boat Africans. That's what the story that we've been told, because they were just shipping by the million, just shipping and shipping and shipping and shipping. But yet, none of these fresh off the boats still got West African dirt in their hair, never got on another boat to go back home. Again, you didn't say 13.3 million. You didn't even say 130,000. You said 13,000. 13,000. And all these are being shipped over here. So somebody needs to help me to understand, why didn't all these fresh out the boat Africans turn around and go right back home? Why didn't they do it? Then I'm gonna show you, this is extra credit. This is, if y'all don't mind, this is a little bit of extra credit. But the Bones, I don't know if you were still there or not.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, carry on, sir. If you still have some more nuggets to give, you can carry on.
Just reading. This is the first colony that the ACS was setting up. It says the ship pulled in first at Freetown, Sierra Leone, where it sailed south to what is now the northern coast of Liberia. The immigrants started to establish a settlement. All 3 whites and 22 of the immigrants died within 3 weeks from yellow fever. The remainder returned to Sierra Leone and waited for another ship. The Nautilus sailed twice in 1821 and established a settlement at what's that, Masurdo Bay on an island that named Preserves. It was difficult for early settlers, made of mostly freeborn blacks who had been denied the full rights of United States citizenship. In Liberia, the native Africans resisted the expansion of the colonies, resulting in many armed conflicts between them. Nevertheless, in the next decade, 2,638 African Americans migrated to the area. Also, the colony entered an agreement with the U.S. government to accept freed slaves who were taken from illegal slave ships. Move further down where it says Civil War and Emancipation. It says the ACS continued to operate during the American Civil War and colonized 168 blacks while it was being waged. It sent 2,492 blacks to Liberia in the following 5 years. The federal government provided a small amount of support for those operations through the Freedmen's Bureau. I'm going to say it again. The federal government provided a small amount of those operations through the Freedmen's Bureau. And here's an article. It says a main article, Abraham Lincoln and Slavery and Colonization. It says since the 1840s, Lincoln, an admirer of Clay, had been an advocate of the ACS program of colonizing blacks in Liberia. Earlier in his presidency, Abraham Lincoln tried repeatedly to arrange resettlement of the kind that the ACS supported, but each arrangement failed. Some scholars believe that Lincoln abandoned the idea by 1863, following the use of black troops. Biographer Stephen B. Oates has observed that Lincoln thought it immoral to ask black soldiers to fight for the U.S. and then remove them to Africa after their military service. Others, such as historians Michael Lind, believe as late as 1864, Lincoln continued to hold out hope for colonization, noting that he allegedly asked Attorney General Edward Bates if he, Reverend James Mitchell, could stay on as your assistant or aide in the matter of executing the several acts of Congress relating to the immigration with an E of or colonization of freed blacks. Mitchell, a former state director of the ACS in Indiana, had been appointed by Lincoln in 1862 to oversee the government's colonization programs. By late into his second term as president, Lincoln had publicly abandoned the idea of colonization after speaking with Frederick Douglass about the matter, who objected harshly to it. On April 11, 1865, with the war drawing to a close, Lincoln gave a public speech at the White House supporting suffrage for blacks, a speech that led actor John Wilkes Booth, who was vigorously opposed to emancipation and black suffrage, to assassinate him. The word that keeps sticking out to me, if they're trying to say Africa is their home, why would they be colonizing it if that's where they came from?
I said, man.
I mean, really, if that's where you come from, why would they have to set up colonies and go through all this stuff for you to be there? And even in Lincoln's own words, where he was like, he thought it to be immoral to ask black soldiers to fight for the U.S. and then remove them to Africa after their military service. He didn't say nothing about sending them home, send them back from where they came from, to remove them and send them to Africa. Just a thought, looking at the wording. Pulling it up right now. All right. A brief piece on what it says, what did Africa mean to Frederick Douglass? In abstract, it says, since the 18th century, anti-slavery and anti-racial activists of African descent across the Atlantic will have sought to establish a connection with Africa. The great American abolitionist Frederick Douglass resisted those trends. Douglass self-identified as a citizen of the USA and rejected all arguments that African Americans had any racial, national, or spiritual connection with African peoples. I'm finna say it again. The great American abolitionist Frederick Douglass resisted those trends. Douglass self-identified as a citizen of the USA and rejected all arguments that African Americans had any racial, national, or spiritual connection with African peoples. That's what Frederick Douglass and why he was opposed to it.
Not Freddie Mac. Say it ain't so. Mr. Abolitionist himself, he said, what again? Can you read that one more time? Because, I'm a little slow over here.
It states the great American abolitionist Frederick Douglass resisted those trends. Douglass self-identified as a citizen of the USA and rejected all arguments that African Americans had any racial, national, or spiritual connection with African peoples. That's his position.
But he just wasn't speaking for himself. He was speaking on behalf of all of those in that land. Can you read that like one more time? Because I just, sometimes things work better in threes. Just one more time for me. I'm sorry.
From the beginning, it says, since the 18th century, anti-slavery and anti-racial activists of African descent across the Atlantic world have sought to establish a connection with Africa. The great American abolitionist Frederick Douglass resisted those trends. Douglass self-identified as a citizen of the USA and rejected all arguments that African Americans had any racial, national, or spiritual connection with African peoples. He says African Americans had any racial, national, or spiritual connection with African people. None.
And I know they cleaned it up for modern terminology. They actually said the Negro.
Negro. Yeah, the actual wording is Negro, but when they updated, they put it in today's term.
So we had people that were shipped over here by the millions that kept no customs, no spiritual traditions of West Africans. And I know somebody gonna say something about Carnival, but you go find out Carnival was over here. Carnival is from here. And you could follow the trail again of those French and where it went and why they celebrate Carnival like they do in France to this very day. Do not let the smooth taste fool you. And please, I'm waiting on my Pan-African associates to come talking about voodoo, because we've already had that discussion, but we can go into depth about voodoo and where it all came from and how it was spread into these West African lands. Voodoo is foreign to the West African. It is not foreign to the Carib or the Caribou. Those in the West Indies, it is not foreign to them. Nor is it foreign to those in Mesoamerica, nor is it foreign to those in what we call Louisiana today. the boot. Also Florida. Matter of fact, just all throughout the Gulf Coast. It's not foreign. So let's think about some things. Let's back up. Let's not get emotional. Because I know sometimes people when they get wrapped up and emotional, because you got people talking about reparations and stuff, and they get emotional and don't see what's in front of their face. Let's look at what's in front of our faces and ask these questions. Again, why aren't these people getting on these boats, going back home? Why aren't the people that are on the shores of West Africa, why are they not embracing them with open arms? You've got to ask yourself these questions. You've got to.
That when they got there, the native Africans didn't want them there. But we're supposed to believe that these people were taken from there, brought to the Americas, and sent back to set up colonies. And I'm going to say it again. Why were they sent there to set up colonies? It sounds like some dirty work. To this day, the two different sets of people over in Liberia to this day are still fighting. The ones that descend from here and the original ones that's over there. Just something to think about.
See, we have to stop and think. And if you think that this narrative hasn't been played out of this, oh, you from here, but we're going to label you African and we're going to label you an African slave. I hope you all don't mind. I just want to give a little extra credit because I didn't get a chance to really, we talked a little bit about it, during the pre-prep. But I wanted to give you something, a little snippet out of my tree. And I'm going to show you how they did it. And let's do this in real time. We're going to do this in real time. That my third great-grandfather was named Levi Williams. He was born in 1844 in Eufaula, Alabama. And I'll put it in the chat. Eufaula, Alabama. Now, prior to his name being Levi Williams, his surname was shorter. Now, they said the reason being that his last name shorter because he was a slave on the shorter plantation in Eufaula. Now, as I kept digging and dealing with more research on my family tree, and I also have a biography dealing with his son, but I'll get back to that a little bit later. 1844, Alabama, Eufaula, Alabama, said he was on the shorter plantation. Now, anybody can say, well, yeah, and they tried to spin a narrative of being brought over here on the slave ship, but they can't remember anything, that his forefathers was brought over here on the slave ship, but couldn't remember anything of what tribe they were from or any of that. Now, it says that he was there on the plantation. Then after the Civil War, right after the Civil War, he just miraculously changed his surname from Shorter to Williams. And maybe I can go into that at another time on another show. But he changed his name to Williams. So now he went from Levi Shorter to Levi Williams. Now, the problem with that is saying that he was a slave on the shorter plantation is, Brother Bones, can you do this for me? Can you put in a search for the shorter plantation in Eufaula, Alabama? And I'll spell it. It is EFAULA. But shorter plantation. And tell me what you come up with. I yield the mic. I'll be right back. But I'm gonna put the name of that. I'm gonna put the name of that town, that establishment, in the back chat.
All right, looking it up right now. It'll give me like a minute or two.
All right, Brother Bones is doing a little research. I didn't want to pause anyone to think that we were knocked off the air. We are still live and in full effect. I want to show you how those that have bought into this "We Are African," how deep it goes. And this is within my own tree. Not that far.
Yeah, only the mansion coming back so far.
Yes, please read that and let me know what year that was established, please.
All right, it's coming up right now. It says the shorter mansion is a classic revival style. The two-story masonry structure was built in 1884 by Eli Sims Shorter II and his wife, Willina Lamore Shorter, but it burnt in 1990. Well, burnt in the 1900s. The house, as seen today, was built in 1906 and was designed by architect Curran R. Ellis of Macon, Georgia.
But when was it? When was it built the first time again?
1884.
Well, by who again?
Let me pull it back. Elias. His name is Eli Sims Shorter II.
Oh, now we're going to get to where the rubber meets the cotton picking road. Shorters were actually Jews, aka Scott Irish, but they were Jews when they came over here to the Americas. And as you do more digging, you will find out that there was a Shorter that is related to Eli S. Shorter that was a governor. And what they were doing was they were putting stakes in the ground and taking over that territory and saying everybody in the land got labeled as a slave. My great-great-granddad never moved from that land until the 1880s when they migrated into Texas. Never heard anything about being slaves or coming from slaves until I picked up a book that someone sent to me. There are only 2 copies in circulation, and I have one that's left. And it is entitled Crowned with Glory and Honor: The Life of Reverend Lacey Kirk Williams. Reverend Lacey Kirk Williams is Eli Williams' son, one of his many sons. Now, the section of the book of them being slaves didn't come out until Lacey Kirk Williams Sr. was assassinated. This book was written by Lillian B. Horace, and it was edited by L. Booth, just the initial L and Booth. Again, I have one of 2 copies that are still in existence. It's amazing how people have flipped this narrative. And one of those that endorsed the book and they got information from was A. Philip Randolph. I'm gonna go into more detail on another show at another time, but I'm gonna show you how they twist that narrative. Now, how did my people go from being Alabama Cushata to all of a sudden in the book, they're listed as slaves on a plantation that did not exist until the 1880s? I yield this cotton picking mic.
All I can tell him is, uh-oh.
So if they did it to mine, you think they didn't do it dealing with Gus? Think about it. Think about it. and this, if you start noticing again how they renaming all these places even today. It's like, oh, this is African American, or this is African land, and I'm like, no. Oh, you see, this was African Town, and this was the style. I said, well, what was it before it was called African Town? And then the tour guys would go, I'm not certain. I just know that they brought Africans here. Okay, again, where did they bring them from? Where's the ship's log? Because in order for the ship's captains and the crew to get paid, you are paid by the cargo. Anyone that does anything with trains or freight or trucks, there is a sheet, there is an invoice that they have to check off. And you don't get paid until someone examines the freight in that car, that train car, or on that tractor trailer. You are not getting paid because something is missing. So when they are docking into those ships, and if you say you brought 200 slaves from Africa, you better have 200 slaves from Africa, or you better have 150 and explain why the other 50 were thrown overboard because they died. And you're not getting paid for those 50 that didn't show up. Where all this, that they were so detailed on Gus's life, but you can't tell me the ship. He can't tell me the journey. He can't tell me how many African slaves were on the ship with him, but everything else was so detailed. And again, he was 11. He said he was 11. Now, I understand if he 2, 3, you don't remember stuff like that, and, kind of remember 11, and you can't count. But then you all of a sudden you got so smart when you got over here and you got educated that you became a ship's captain. Think about it. I'm off the mic.
That's why we say question and research everything. Dig and find as much information as you can. We have to stop going for the okie doke stories, the ones that feel good and get us all emotional. Because once that happens, we get distracted from the facts. No sellout. Any input you want to put in? Or everything cool?
Big brother No Sellout is over there fanning down those flames. Let's get a little hot in here.
Well, like you said, James made a good point. And it's also something that we dug up during the Rising show. That how many of these towns got changed when states are rezoning and resectioning.
Yeah.
They're telling you that people lived in particular places and areas that didn't even exist till almost 30, 40, or sometimes 100 years later. Especially trying to tie people in the 1700s to be on plantations that didn't even exist until the 1800s. And where the mass amounts of filings of African on these census records? If they're saying at these times that they know, so why, even on the ones that's marked down as slaves, why it don't say African? And I don't mean on the digital where they updated. I'm talking on the actual census where you look in there and you see the signatures of your people. Why African is no category? Well, African American came a census title in 2000. 2000 it became something that you can claim. Something to think about.
Yep, this reminds me of those songs by Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. Whitney Houston had, I get so emotional every time I think of you. And then Mariah Carey had emotions. Yep, we get caught up in emotions and don't bring any facts, any data, no information. We just say, I'm African, and I'm not saying, and I'll put it out there because Brother Thomas says it all the time. If you African, take your right hand, take the oath, and you are African, and I will call you African, and I will say it respectfully. But do not try to make me what I am not. That's all we're saying, and that's all we've been saying. And don't use one person like Gus. Don't try to use his memoirs and then try to put millions of people falling into that same category when we're finding holes in his story. Yeah. I yield the mic.
Especially when you come to find out his story was circulated and spread widely because it served the abolitionist movement at the time. But then when you get the chance to look at who the abolitionist was, you're like, hold on, man. Why are you trying to send us to Africa?
Because if you recall, wasn't it somewhere written that it was illegal for people that look like us to be able to read? So who was reading this information? And who was it being read to, and for what? Because even with this being circulated and this being read orally to those that could not read the English language, and you said it was translated into what other language? Was it in German, I believe? Dutch, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
So we were not reading Old English and Dutch or German are all the same, but we were not reading Old English and we were not reading German or Dutch. So this being circulated amongst these abolitionists that were reading it to those that couldn't read the language, again, you still only got 13,000 to go. After all of this, years later, you circling around, then here comes the ACS, the American Colonization Society. No one bought it. Abraham Lincoln tried. Freddie Mac told him no. And then he says, well, because they served in the military, I feel bad if they have to go home. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen, boys and gals, there are a lot of people from other countries that serve in the United States military. And when they get out, when they've done their tour, guess where they go? Back home. Do not let the smooth taste fool you. Don't let them do that to you. Matter of fact, my platoon sergeant was from Panama. You think he's still here on this soil? No. When he did his outsourcing, guess where they shipped him back to? Panama. Hello. Don't believe the hype. Do not.
In fact, Tiffany, all slave narratives should be questioned and analyzed. They should. And that's what we're saying. But I got one for the chat and everybody listening to think about. If we are so African, like they want to tell you how they put that African in front of the American of your title or status, why when the Olympics come around, you can't go play for nobody else? I'll wait. You need paperwork to prove that that's your mother country to play for. In the Olympics, man, we talk about games, sports. You need paperwork to say that's who you is.
Yep. Why wouldn't this be this bad exodus to say, you know what? Hey, I'm playing basketball for Nigeria. LeBron James. Why is this not happening? Why is not all these track stars say, you know what? I'm going to go run for the Ivory Coast. I'm going to go run for Ghana. I'm going to go run for Sierra Leone. I'm going to put them on the map. They be superstars. Why can't they do that? Why can't they go back home? Because here's the kicker. Oh, I'm going to take you one further, and especially when it comes to track and field, because that's my heart. Why is it, if all of these people are so-called Africans, why is it those from the Caribbean going into England to represent Great Britain? Nowadays, because they always say that all of these in the West Indies could trace themselves back and go, and they have the same story to Africa. Where? What house are you from? What are your traditions? And they be like, oh, we're beating the drums. Well, we're paying the drums. The drums have been over here. The Spaniards talk about the beating of the drums, and it's not that beating with that one stupid stick off beat like you see those that are calling themselves Indians or Native Americans today. It was a rhythm. Don't let the smooth taste fool you. I'll say it again. Look up the sea walk. Put a beat to it on the drums. The same rhythm, the same beat that we were having over here has not changed. because I'm waiting on the great West African rapper. I know a lot of great rappers that came from the islands. As a matter of fact, truth be told, hip hop started in the Caribbean. Why didn't it start in West Africa? Oh man, I got to get off the mic. I got to go. I yield the mic. I know they don't believe me. Notorious B.I.G., Biggie B, give me one more chance. Find out where he's from. Heavy D, better find out where he's from.
For those who don't know, I can verify it to them. Hip hop comes from there. That's why you have the 8-ball hook repetitive, the 16 bars for the verse. That's reggae, which we can take back to its original form, ska. But that's music history. That's another subject.
You mean not the 5? Not on the 5? It's on the 8? Not on the 5? Is that what you're saying, Brother Bones?
Yeah. Well, you know, in reggae, they can also go odd, but the whole format of hip hop comes from that.
Uh-oh, now we're getting a little bit of music, because, you know, we just have this in casual conversation, and we may have to do a couple of days shows just on the music and the rhythms. And I'll say again, and I say, and I say, and I say again, those of us that have musical ears can tell you that the rhythms of West Africa are not the same rhythms that you find in the Americas. They are not. Don't let them fool you.
Different beat count, completely different.
Oh, we just messed up some people, up. Whatever we have to do is we have to just break this up in segments and then just rebroadcast it in segments, because I think it may have been too much for the masses to swallow. I know someone's going to try to take it and try to say, oh, yeah, but let me show you this. And I'm still waiting. And I've been waiting for 15 years. I've been waiting, and I'm still waiting. I am still waiting. So please, good people, come. We can. I want to have a healthy dialogue with 3 categories of people. I want to have a healthy dialogue with an actual West African. I would like to have a healthy dialogue with those of us that know that we are Indians, and another portion of the panel of Pan-Africanists. I would love for us to sit down and have this conversation, and it could be behind closed doors. I prefer it to be live. To figure out.
Sound good to me.
It's cut off or not, the phone call coming in, but I wasn't going to take it. All of these Africans by the millions, and no one carved it into a stone. No one put it in dirt. No one carved it into a tree. No one passed anything down orally that said this happened, because when you talk to West Africans, they say they don't find out about any transatlantic slave trade until they start talking with so-called blacks, quote unquote, in America. Why isn't this being passed down? Why don't they know about it? And they were there. Their people were on the land. Why didn't they pass this down? They talk about what happened with the Arabs that came in. They mention that. And the lands that are now Muslim territories. They talk about that, but they don't talk about the millions, not a couple of hundred people, millions, so-called, that were shipped out on all of these pirate ships, that none of these pirates, you could never name any of these pirates, and how they were getting paid, what were the ship's logs, what do they have on there? And I'm not, and I'll say this, and I am going to yield the mic. No one is saying that slavery didn't happen, because we've already proven it with the Indians. I'm not even saying that Africans didn't come over here. But if you only coming over here and you a couple of thousand at the most, and you came over here as indentured servants, now you may have been caught up in being enslaved for perpetuity, like they had some of the Indians, because you were a prisoner of war and you got caught up. But you can't explain to me how a couple of thousand, when you have been brought into a sea of millions, that now all of these millions are African because a couple of thousand came over here as quote unquote slaves. I yield the mic.
Even if you study the numbers that they give you, they'll tell you 12 million. But out of them 12 million, they'll tell you only 5% ever made it to British North America. Goes back to what Brother James said. No one's saying that they didn't bring anyone here, but to make everyone here that's melanated an African, that's a problem. When history already states that the records that show 12 Africans brought 73 to the islands, mixed in with the indigenous population that was already there. There's letters to King Fernando back in Spain where they stated don't bring nobody from the continent that we call Africa today, because they were blending in with the Indians on the islands and running up to the mountains. That's why genealogy, again, is the key. Find out who you are. We're not here to tell you who you are. We're not here to tell you who you're not. We just say question the stories that we've been told over and over, and you'll see the holes. Start doing research on yourself, on your family, and see where you tie in. And I guess on that note, any closing remarks? No sellout, James?
Oh man, Brother Bones, I appreciate this. You know, this is like we used to have like the after school specials. See, I'm telling my age now, but we used to have the after school. That was long before Okra. Before Oprah Winfrey started coming on, it used to be the after school specials that would come on, talk about school stuff, and then movies about Godzilla or Kung Fu would come on after that. And then the news would come on later on. But I would rush to get home, I'd do my homework, and I'd watch those after school specials. This was an after school special. So play it back for your kids. Play it back for your grandkids. So do you want better? Play it for your grandpappy. And he'll tell you. He's like, them young whippersnappers, they own it. Because they don't tell you about no African stuff. You don't hear that. You do not hear that. You hear them, and I'm going to say this, and I know it's going to get me in trouble. But you are going to find that most of those that are pushing Africa are from the Caribbean, especially up there in New York, in New Jersey, in Philly. You'll find out that they're actually from the Caribbean, and then ask yourself, why are you pushing this African narrative so badly? Why are you doing that? Just think about it for a little bit. Why are they? And it's those that they don't even have a desire to go back home. And I asked some, especially one from Jamaica. I asked them, why aren't you going back to your homeland, to the island, talking this West African narrative? Why? Because you'll get laughed right up out of there, which is why you are in New York now. You got ran from home because they said you're not coming talking that. Again, someone please show me all of these so-called African customs. Don't give me 3 words in some West African dialect and try to say, see, I told you, man, I told you. When again, I can go back and show you all of these words, especially a lot of these words that we think is Spanish, and I mean old Spanish. You're going to find out these words originated over here. Don't let them fool you. The vocabulary was increased when they got over here. because they didn't have words for the things that they found or discovered or was shown over here. So they had to use the words of the people of the land and what they told them it was. Think about it. But I would like to do also a couple of days on the shoes. The shoes. How they were separating us, whether you were an Indian or a slave, is they would take your shoes. Remember, we had shoes. We had moccasins, and we also had what is known today as your tennis shoes. Zapata, the rubber people. I yield this wait a minute, before I do, let me back up. I want to thank Brother Bones. I want to thank Brother No Sellout. I want to thank Brother Thomas. I want to thank Lady Free. I want to thank, so I know I'm getting people up. I want to thank Brother Kerry. Brother Kerry, wherever you are, I know you out there somewhere. Holy man, you out there somewhere. Everyone in the chat, if I start mentioning names, I'm going to forget someone. But I know that there was some in there. I know there was Marlon P., the mixologist. I know there was Golden Bad Moon Rising. I know there was Pamela Hall Pass. If I'm leaving some people out. I know there was Sister Tiffany that was in there. Lady Tiffany, I saw you in there. I know you asking a lot of good questions. I appreciate all of y'all for taking the time out, because you could have been doing anything else, going anywhere else on this Friday. You could have been kicking it, trying to get well, I got to say this, and then I am going to yield the mic. Don't be stupid. Don't get firecrackers, and don't be like JPP. They used to play for the Giants, because I don't want to see you here doing the hook 'em horn sign because you only got 3 fingers. So don't do it. Go take your family to go see a professional fireworks show. Don't try to hold it and do Roman candles and run around and chase people, and then you burn your house down. I yield this cotton picking Mike. I'm out.
Any remarks from you, No Sellout?
Man, I can't wait till the second installment. I appreciate everybody for coming out. Have a great weekend.
And like we said, this is the first of many afternoon builds we'll bring to where we just break down a particular topic from questions that you send in from the chat. You know, if there's something that you want us to break down or get to our research, email it, put it up in the chat in the show, you know, and we'll do our best to bring the best of the information forward as possible. And on that note, this has been an Autonomous Assembly production. And until we all get together with the relatives again,
Peace, y'all.